Hi, I'm Judith. I'm Canadian and I'm over 80 years old. And in my long life, I've learned a whole bunch of stuff that I would like to share with you about how to create a happy and successful and productive and fulfilling life. Um, so today I'm going to talk about keeping things in order, not just with keeping things in order using lists, which I did before, but how do you actually keep things really in order? And why it's important and why it helps in creating a happy life. Um, so when things are out of order, you have something called disorder, and disorder can happen in all kinds of ways and in all kinds of major ways too. Today, I'm not going to talk about um, the very big kinds of disorders where your life gets totally turned about, where someone dies, where you're hit with a fatal illness. I mean, something that just turns your life completely on edge. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just the little things in life that get out of order, and I'm going to talk about them, about the material plane, about your finances, about your home, your car, your possessions, um, things that get lost or that stop working or that get damaged or broken or get dirty, and they just aren't the way that they really ideally ought to be. Now there are lots of other bigger ways for disorder to happen, or different planes on which it can happen. You can have spiritual disorder, you can have mental disorder. Again, not talking about things like schizophrenia or huge mental illness, but you can have seasonal depression. You can have something that you're worried about. You can have relational upsets in your relationships with people that therefore your relationships are a bit disordered. You can have uh, mental, spiritual, mental, physical, emotional, all those things, or even in your health. You can have somewhat disorders in your health, but I'm not going to talk about those today. I'm just going to talk about uh, the things around you. So one of the reasons that order is really important for me is that I have ADHD. I don't think it's the only reason, but let me talk about that for a sec. I do have ADHD. I was diagnosed in my mid 50s, or early 50s, early 50s. They just called it ADD at that point. I don't know about the hyperactive part. Maybe I have that. Um, but certainly my brain is always a little bit in chaos. Things go out of my brain, things are in my brain, things swirl around in my brain. Um, I often have too much happening in there, and it feels a bit disorderly in there sometimes. Excuse me. I don't know what that is. So one of the reasons, just talking, I guess. So one of the reasons that I really have a need to keep things in order around me is so that because the insides are a little squirrely, the outsides need to be calm and peaceful and serene. They don't have to be totally minimalist. You can see, judging by the things behind me here, that I'm not a minimalist. I've got lots of stuff. On the other hand, they're not like my friend Lizzie in England, who is an artist and who has so much stuff that every inch of every wall of her Victorian townhouse is covered with things, and every surface is covered with beautifully arranged pieces of glass or art pieces, little sculptures, whatever. Um, it's quite a work of art, and it's not a disorder. It's just lots of things in a kind of order. I can't stand that either. It's too much. Um, but I'm not a minimalist. And as long as things have a place in my life, as long as everything in the house has a place where it can be, and it's in that place, then things are in order. As long as that thing is working, it's clean, it's functional, it's working okay, then that's in order. If I lose something, then there's some disorder. Um, Losing things really upsets me, especially if they mean things. But sometimes I get upset about losing small things, and sometimes I don't get upset at all about losing something that's more meaningful. I just have that feeling that it's gone, and I guess it was meant to go. But but often, yeah, things are in disorder. I count the silverware and the cutlery when it comes out of the dishwasher, because I started out with 8 forks and 8 knives and 8 spoons in a set, and 8 small forks and 8 big spoons, whatever. And suddenly the teaspoons, oh, there are only 6 of them, because they go out in the garbage. And I've certainly lost pieces of my good silverware set that way as well. So now I count them when they come out, and I make sure that they're all there. And once in a while, one gets mislaid somewhere, and I have to figure out where that is before I can rest easy again. So maybe I'm a little extreme about this, but I hope you'll bear with me here. I do believe that whether you have ADHD or not, or whether, just for ordinary people, people who are not neurodivergent in any way, a lack of order, a bunch of disorder can at some point tip over the balance from being okay and not interfering with their life at all into being not okay. And I may be at one extreme end of it, but I certainly have known people that find disorder just a little too much to bear. It adds stress. It can add inefficiency. If things are such a mess that you can't find things, you're not finding your keys because they don't have a place where they go, and then you can't find them and you have to look for them. That sort of stress it may not make your life really horribly unhappy, but it adds a level of, it takes away a level of peace, let's put it that way. It takes away certain serenity and certain peace and a certain sense of the rightness of the world. Now, life has a way of always having these things happen. So we're not going to escape by having everything in order all the time. And even for me, who spends a lot of time keeping things in order, I have times when I have things that are not in order. Right now, up on my kitchen counter, there are a bunch of little plastic bags from the bulk food store, and they've got pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds and chia seeds and some other bits and pieces of healthy eating things that I should add to my food, and that I do add to my food. And I just haven't taken the time. They've been there for weeks, and I've been using them every day, almost every day, but I have not been taking the time to go and get containers for them and put them into containers and put them away where they ought to be put away. And I will get to that one of these days, because that bit of disorder will bother me more. So I'm not saying that you have to have everything in place all the time, totally. But what happens is, I've gone into people's homes where I don't know how they stand it, but, and maybe they do, but I can't help but think it affects them and their children and their lives, where every surface is cluttered, where the milk is sitting out on the counter instead of being in the fridge. And one thing is, it's going to go bad, and then that means you got to go to the store and you get it, so that causes way more disorder and disruption than if you just put it back in the fridge when you got it out. I've been in homes where, I don't know, a cupboard door got broken, and so it got taken off because maybe it had glass in it or something. It got broken and it got taken off, and so now you've got all your cupboards, but then one cupboard door just isn't there in the kitchen. And every time you look at that, or the floor that is lovely hardwood is so scratched up from having dogs, you know that every time you look at it, it's a sign that your life that things are not what they ought to be, that they're not proper, that you're not taking care of things properly. And for some people, may have quite a high tolerance for that and not find that it really bothers them. But I believe that at some subliminal level, it really bothers people. I've talked before, I talked in another video about how my granddaughter has said that she's never going to make a bed because she's a grown-up. And she's never going to make her bed because it's just not worth the energy. Well, I don't know. For me, a bed that's unmade during the day is a sense of disorder. I don't like it. And I think it's why armies teach recruits to make their beds properly and so on. But I like getting into a made bed. Even it feels cleaner, it feels fresher when I pull back covers and I see that the sheets are straight and so on. It's not all rumpled and crumpled. It adds to my sense of peace and well-being and serenity. So but I'm going to talk a little bit. So, given that people differ in what they do, but what do you do when things get out of order? So, there are kind of two main things to do. One thing, and it's perfectly acceptable in many cases, in some cases, one thing is to say, I'm not going to do anything about it. Um, and I see the sense of that in some cases. I have an example in my own life of that. Um, but an example I'll use, the other day, my trainer, I go to a gym a couple of times a week and do strength training with the trainer, and he's young, he's under 25. He's married, and he had a little fender bender, and his car is dented a bit. Uh, Apparently nothing that is functionally a problem. It's not going to cause rust. It's not damaging. It's not terribly out of whack. I don't know if it's just a little dent or what it is exactly. But he said, they didn't want to put it through the insurance because he's under 25 and it would really be a problem. They're a young couple. They don't have a lot of money to spend on getting it repaired, and car repairs cost a lot. It's not a car they're going to keep a long time, and they're not really too concerned. It was a used car. It's not in perfect shape anyway, I guess. And it was like, okay. And they're not going to be bothered fixing it. And that seems perfectly reasonable to me. I get that. I can understand it. I have one in my life, and I like to get everything really fixed up when I can. And usually I can manage to afford it and have the time to chase that down and get it done. Because I'm old and I'm retired, But I was doing a big clean out of the fridge a few months ago. This is one of the major clean outs where you take everything out and you wipe down everything. You just go after everything in the fridge and check all the dates and wipe all the compartments and all the shelves and everything. And there were places where meat juices or whatever had leaked, or things had spilled over and had leaked, and they were between glass. And in a couple of cases, I could go to YouTube or go to the appliance store and go to various manuals and figure out how to get those shelves out and the glass apart and get them fixed. But there was one shelf in my fridge where meat juices, I think it's meat juices, have from things defrosting and they weren't on a proper plate or something, and they spilled and they dried. They're not causing any harm. They're not causing any mold or anything. But somewhere between two layers of glass, there is a dried up stain. And that shelf cannot be taken apart. I've checked with the manufacturer and I've checked with the appliance store, and that can't be. And so I checked on the cost of replacing that shelf, and it's going to be $87 plus what tax or whatever Canadian, I don't know, $50, $60 US. And you can't see it. When I'm standing at the fridge, I cannot see it. I would have to be much shorter and be looking up at the bottom of that shelf. And I've just decided for the moment, out of sight, out of mind, I'll live with it. And I think that's fair because nothing terrible is going to happen because of that. On the other hand, if I thought that it was going to cause any kind of molding or infection or further spreading, or it was going to, I don't know, make the fridge rust or something, it wouldn't, but anything like that, then I would be getting it fixed, because otherwise I would have a bigger problem on my hands ultimately. So that's one thing. You can decide you're just going to leave it. It's okay. There's nothing terrible that's going to happen because of it. But there are some things you don't want to leave. And most things, I think, fall into this situation. Some bits of disorder you do not want to leave as they are. You want to get them fixed or the thing replaced or take care of that bit of disorder, because it can cause further problems down the line. If your car gets bashed in a way, gets scraped or something in a way that the salt on the roads from Ontario winters is going to cause it to rust, then maybe you really need to get that fixed. And it might not be the most elaborate fix you can get, but you need to have that fixed in some way so that the rust doesn't get at it. If you somehow forget or don't manage to pay your income tax one year, and to file your income tax and to pay the money that's owing, I think you better want to take care of that before the what is it, the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS, or the CRA, the Canadian Revenue Agency, comes after you for back taxes, for defaulting on your taxes. If you forgot to renew your driver's license, you want to get that fixed pretty fast, or you forgot even to notify them of an address change, because you're supposed to do that within 2 weeks of moving. Because then if you get stopped for a ticket and your address is wrong, you can be charged for having done that as well. So there are just things where you want to get them fixed right away. And then I also think that there's a cumulative effect. Even if something isn't going to, maybe it's no big deal that the cupboard door is off, except that every time you look at it, you see that that needs to be done. And if you've got enough of those things that you're seeing all the time, that takes away a certain amount of peace from your life, and it adds a certain amount of stress to your life. And so I would encourage you to actually fix those things. If you leave things like that too long, they can become actual messes. That is, you can get to the point where you go to sell your house and it isn't worth as much because something is rotted out, because something has happened, because there's been water dripping down behind a wall that you didn't know about and you didn't get it fixed. Things can become really big and really complex. But I'll just give you a small example of taking care of things that happened today. Last night, actually, I was heating up our dinner in the toaster oven, and I realized that the toaster oven was a little dirty. It wasn't terrible, but there were crumbs on the bottom. There were some drippings on the burners and on the shelves in it that had kind of hardened on. And so I thought, oh, yeah, that needs to be cleaned. And so I made a mental note to do it today. I left it sitting out further in the counter. When we're not using the toaster oven, it's back against the wall. When we go to use it, we just pull it forward so it's not being hot against the wall. And I left it out there so that it being out of place would remind me to do it today. And this morning I spent maybe 15 minutes. I don't think it was more than that. Cleaning it. I just had to take the pan out of the bottom, scrub it a bit, do some scrubbing on the burners, do some scrubbing on the shelves. Didn't take long at all. If I had left that another month or two, it would have taken me much more time. And I'd rather do 10 minutes this month and 10 minutes a couple of months from now, or whenever something spills, or 15 minutes, than having to do an hour of scrubbing at it, because then that becomes a really big task. Now, if I hadn't been able to do it today, I would have actually put it on my list on my weekly task list of things to do under the topic of order. And today's Sunday, so it's the last day of the week, but it would have gone on today's list and the week's list. And then when I later on today make my list for next week, it would get transferred over to be done next week. And that's how I keep track of things. That's how things don't get forgotten and things do get dealt with. They might not get dealt with for 2 or 3 weeks sometimes, but they do get dealt with eventually. Anyway, keeping things in order is, it doesn't take usually much time to do it at the time. But it really helps to do it as soon as you can, to replace something, to fix something. If it can be fixed, to clean it up, just just to do those things. I'll give you just one more example. Again, maybe this is why I'm doing this video, because I've had a couple of these in the last couple of days. My partner, I mentioned in videos, broke his hip a month or so ago, and he's recovering nicely. And today they came to collect the commode chair that he had to use over the toilet, a chair so that he was up higher. And what I had discovered a few days ago, actually, is that chair had been set up so it was a bit too low, and it has scraped the porcelain surface off the toilet in a couple of places. Because when you sit on it, and the metal went down and scraped it. And so my intention today was, as soon as they took that commode chair away, was to go and paint that with some little porcelain touch-up paint that I keep. But when I went to open the porcelain touch-up paint, it turned out it had all dried up, so I can't do that. So then I had to go to my list of things to do, buy porcelain paint and fix up the porcelain bits on the toilet. And again, that will get transferred to my list for next week when I do my weekly list tonight. And then things will be back in order in that part of the world for us. It's easier to keep up with it just as it happens rather than to let it go and then to have a whole bunch of things that have to be done. So that's my thought for today. It's a really practical way to help keep your life peaceful and less stressful and in order, and so you're not always losing things or looking at disorder. So until next time, please like and subscribe. I really appreciate people to subscribe to this channel because then it'll get out to more people. I'm trying to be helpful. And if you find this helpful at all, please like, subscribe, and comment. I'd love to see comments. I don't have any comments yet on any of the videos. So take care, and till the next time.